guest is the articles editor of The New Yorker. She's the former editor-in-chief of The New York Observer, an original editor of Spy Magazine, and the one-time features director of Vogue. Her new book, Lorne, The Man Who Invented Saturday Night Live, just reached the New York Times bestsellers list and is in stores now. Please welcome to the show, Susan Morrison, everybody.
Hello, Seth.
So again, I know the man fairly well, and yet I found out so much more about him reading your incredible book. I cannot recommend it enough. Mostly, the people in his circle are fascinated by the very fact that he agreed to do it.
I was a little surprised by that, too. I'll tell you how it happened, if you want to know. I knew Lorne slightly because I worked for him very briefly in the 80s when he had his one spectacular public failure, The New Show.
This was after his first 5 years at
Yes.
SNL and before he came back.
Exactly. And so after the 40th anniversary, I was really knocked out by that show and very moved by it. And I thought, God, Lorne's story, that's an incredible story. I knew that if I went to him, he would say no, because he's a private person. He always counsels people, don't talk to reporters. But I sold a book to Random House. I told them I didn't have Lorne on board. Then I went to Lorne's office and I said, how are you doing, Lorne? I just wanted to tell you, I just sold a book about you and the show. I don't need anything from you because you know I'm very connected in your world. I know your people. But if you wanted to talk to me, it would be a richer, better book, you know, better reflection of your legacy. And, you know, he looked like he was about to have a heart attack. Because as you told me, I think, when I interviewed you, Lorne hates surprises.
Yeah, he really does. For a guy who does a live television show.
He likes to know what's going to happen. And so, you know, we sat down, we made conversation, and he said, well, you know, let me think about it. And then a few days later, I contacted him again. We met for a drink, and something really interesting happened that also, Seth, you told me about in terms of, you know, what Lorne is like. We were sitting there, and it was like it was like we had skipped over a conversation.
Yeah.
You know, we sat down, there were no negotiations, no terms. He just started telling stories about Chevy and hockey in Toronto and, you know, Joey Heatherton. And, you know, so he was just talking, and I realized, oh, I guess this is going to happen. And of course, I didn't have a notepad or anything with me, so I'd run into the ladies' room and write things down and come back. And, you know, he asked nothing of me, and I just started going over to his office on Friday nights, and we had these nice conversations.
So I want to note, you mentioned that you approached him after the 40th. I don't need to tell you, the 50th just happened.
I know.
So did this book, was this a 10-year process because of how long it took to interview people, or did the book become a different thing the longer you worked on it?
Well, I didn't intend for it to take 10 years. I'm sure my editor didn't either. It's just how long it took. You know, as you told the people, I have a pretty demanding day job. I interviewed Lorne probably for a couple of years, and then it took, you know, a few more years to interview you and everybody else on the planet who knows Lorne, which is a lot of people. And I realized, oh, there's a great peg coming up, the 50th. And then it just all seemed like that's how it was always supposed to be, and it worked out
It
great.
would have been embarrassing if it came out 3 years after the 50th.
Or 3 months. Yeah,
3 months.
Yeah,
it was very well timed. There's a wonderful parallel tracks to the book, which I was so impressed by as just a framing device, which is you tell Lorne's life story in order, but each chapter sort of bounces back and forth. You were also embedded for a week in 2018, and that has this thrilling, like, ticking clock that the show always has of this is what a Monday's like, this is what a Tuesday like. And it was so, I felt so true to my experience there, how much you grabbed that time. What was it like sitting there being a fly on the wall for that week?
Well, it was, you know, I knew a little bit about how the show came together, but what I wasn't prepared for was just that feeling of the show picking up steam. You know, every day it got tenser and tenser until you felt like it was the Hunger Games.
Yeah.
You know, by Saturday, you know, who's going to be left standing? You said to me, the worst thing to happen to you on Saturday is if you don't even need hair and makeup.
Yeah.
You know, so you'd see these people's hopes crushed. But I also was there for a very interesting week. Alec Baldwin got arrested that week. I was in the room when the text came in that Alec had just punched somebody in the Village over a parking place.
Yeah.
And that was an interesting thing to metabolize. And then there was also an interesting little tension, a lot of discussion of how will the show deal with Alec's arrest?
Yeah.
Will it be an update or will it not? And finally, at the very last minute, the perfect solution was hit upon, which is, okay, have Fox News be reporting on disgraced former actor Alec Baldwin. So, yeah, no, that device of intertwining those chapters happened because I realized, anyone's life is kind of just a death march through the years, but especially at SNL because it's broken into seasons, and I knew I needed to vary the texture.
You also talk about Lorne's life pre-SNL, which is sometimes hard to fathom that it actually existed because, again, he's had the same office for 50 years. Very few people have this. But you write about how he used to sell Jeeps.
Well, oh my God, yeah. I think the part that was most fun to research was the pre-SNL part because no one knows anything.
No.
So when he was a college student, he went to Europe, and one of his friends had his friend's parents had an Army-Navy store, and this guy had bought a whole load of rusty old World War II Jeeps. And Lorne had this entrepreneurial idea. It was, the summer of love, that he would paint them in pastel colors and try to unload them on hippies traveling around Europe. Anyway, that didn't really work out. But he started to take out ads in local papers, and he and his friend Howard Shore, who you know,
yes, of course,
original music director of SNL, they got one nibble, and they were summoned to this fussy old men's club in downtown London, where they met a guy who was looking to put together arms for a coup in Cameroon. And they thought that Lorne and Howard, were going to sell him tanks and everything. So anyway, it's a good thing he didn't.
I wish I'd known that, because every time he gave me a note, I'd be like, all right, Jeep guy. Did you pick up any SNL lingo that you enjoy having in your back pocket now?
Well, if the book wasn't already too long, I would have wanted to add a glossary. Because SNL, as you know, has its own language. And I'm now using this around the New Yorker, and people are kind of staring at me all the time. There's one that I love, the word rounding.
Yep, rounding means we're about to have a table read, and so they just they treat us like cattle and basically say rounding.
Rounding.
Yeah.
I also like a couple of words to describe pieces, like a room temperature piece.
Yeah.
Which is just Jim Downey specialized in those. He's just kind of low key, not too.
But very dry, very incredibly well written. Yeah.
And that leads to another great word, which now I use all the time at work: sweaty. Which is that you don't want the comedy to be too sweaty in that kind of Catskills comic.
Yes, like
pushing.
Needy,
look at me.
Very needy comedy. Yeah, Lorne. That was the thing. And Lorne is so dry and so deeply funny as well.
Yes.
Nothing is worse than sort of sitting under the bleachers with him while a sweaty piece isn't playing.
Yes.
And then because you can almost feel his entire body like.
And then he'll turn to you and he'll say something like, "Are you proud of yourself?"
Yeah.
Or, "Can they take the Emmy away?"
Can they take the Emmy away is a real favorite of ours. Yeah. He's very fun. He's very fun to be around, and you've done an incredible job of painting a portrait of the man. And thanks so much for being here. Congrats on the success of the book.
Thank you.
Susan Morrison, everyone. Lorne, the man who invented Saturday Night Live, is available now.